Before Paleolithic peoples, or my paleo peeps as I fondly call them, settled down into early city-states, early people lived in caves, huts, or teepees. They gathered and hunted for food, used basic stone and bone tools, as well as crude stone axes for hunting birds and wild animals. No, they did not go out and immediately start punching a tree. That's a myth perpetuated by Minecraft. Women and men shared responsibilities and were mutually reliant on one another. These dynamics would change with the advent of agriculture and led to a very interesting religious dynamic. Everywhere around the world, religions formed, and everywhere around the world, female goddesses or feminine beings were a part of that faith. Who were these goddesses, and where did they go? Welcome to Remedial Herstory, where we ask what happened to the women and put them in. In this series, we tell women's history from era to era from the perspectives of differing and diverse women. Women are half of history. Welcome to Her Story. Religions of the Paleolithic era were distinctly different from modern religion in that they were heavily influenced by nature, usually polytheistic, and importantly honored female goddesses in almost equal number to male gods. These goddesses and gods had power over certain aspects of human life, and the worshippers would pray to the particular god to address their need. Worship was ritualistic, spiritual, and varied from tribe to tribe, region to region. Sexuality was evidently important as gods and goddesses had exaggerated genitalia, and many of the early myths included details of procreation. Facts. The historical record is sprinkled with textual evidence of matriarchal or divine feminine past that would have been passed down for centuries by oral tradition and later recorded. One ancient Indian saying, for example, stated, "Woman is the creator of the universe. The universe is her form. Woman is the foundation of the world. There is no prayer equal to a woman. There is not, nor has been, nor will there ever be a yoga compared to a woman. A man's world? I don't think so." Mesopotamia was the world's first civilization with recorded history. Gods and goddesses there were more gender fluid and exemplified a variety of qualities and characteristics later associated with one gender or another. None demonstrates this more than Inanna. She was the goddess of love, beauty, sex, war, justice, and political power. One Mesopotamian hymn from the Sumerian city-state about Inanna describes her as a virgin who wanted to know more about sex. She asks her brother to take her into the underworld where she can taste the fruit of a tree that grows there. Inanna is also part of a Cain and Abel-esque tale as she begins courtship and eventually chooses the god of shepherds over the farmer. This story was important to the great challenge of the time as societies were adjusting to new systems of economics. There are several versions of their relationship. In one, she goes on an epic journey to save him from the underworld. She passes through 7 gates. At each, she must strip a layer off of her. This is intended to humiliate and destroy her power. When she arrives, she is completely naked. Eventually, he is permitted to visit her for half the year, but must stay in the underworld the other half. In other variations, Inanna may have killed him. Hades, eat your heart out. Inanna morphed and became Ishtar by 2500 BCE. Some Mesopotamian empires elevated her to the highest deity in their pantheon, even over other national gods. Ishtar's strength and fearsomeness is featured in the oldest story in the world, the Epic of Gilgamesh, written between 2900 BCE and 2350 BCE. The epic includes fantastic adventure tales and tales of women taming men, but it also holds warnings about female power and sexuality. In one tale, our girl Ishtar falls for the king Gilgamesh, but he rejects her since she had killed her previous lovers. Talk about being a stickler. Goddesses around the world, and certainly Ishtar, did not often display mothering qualities. In a lot of cases, she was violent, sexual, and killed men wildly. He asked her, "Which of your lovers did you love forever? What shepherd of yours pleased you for all time? And if you and I should be lovers, should I not be served in the same fashion as all these others whom you once loved?" The answer? Probably. Facing rejection, Ishtar got a demonic bull to terrorize Uruk, his city, and cause widespread devastation. Hell hath no fury like a goddess scorned indeed. The bull lowered the level of Euphrates River and dried up the marshes. It opened up huge pits that swallowed 300 men. Apparently, without any divine assistance, Gilgamesh was able to kill it. Ishtar mourned with the courtesans and harlots, while Gilgamesh celebrated with the craftsmen, switching loyalty to the sun god. Later in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we have the Great Flood, which has parallels to the story of Noah and the Ark from the Torah or the Old Testament. According to the epic, when the flood came, Ishtar mourned over the destruction of humanity, and she swore to stop future floods. Temples were devoted to Ishtar through different empires in Mesopotamia, and the lion icon most associated with her, yes, there were once lions in Iraq, is displayed prominently in the iconography of the region. Ishtar continued to thrive long after the Greek and Romans conquered the region. She likely influenced the development of the Greek goddess Aphrodite. A cult to her continued to flourish until its gradual decline between the 1st and 6th centuries CE in the wake of Christianity. In Hinduism, the world's oldest continuing religion, there has long been a strong tradition of goddess worship. This divine feminine is known as Devi, simply meaning goddess or the great mother. She is understood to be the embodiment of Shakti, the feminine and creative power of the universe. While this power is eternal and formless, all other Hindu goddesses are considered to be manifestations of Devi. Devi is not considered a consort of a male deity, but independent, and in some traditions is even regarded as superior, above male deities. Take that, patriarchy. Shaktism acknowledges the creative potential of women who are seen to maintain familial and social order. Shakti is also considered the counterpart of the masculine spirit, but neither can survive without the other, providing a promising model for gender equality. Many Aztec goddesses were genderless or dual gender. The Aztec goddess Coatlicue was considered the mother of all gods and embodied the opposites: life and death, light and dark, male and female. Almost all representations of this goddess depict her deadly side. Well, I know who I'm going to be next Halloween. Creation stories were recorded in almost every world culture and give us a great insight into the oral traditions passed down for millennia. In China, the story of the goddess Nua goes like this. In the beginning, surrounded by chaos, was the sleeping giant named Pangu. The hairy horned giant woke up and upon standing, split the heavens and the earth. After thousands of years, he died and his body became the sun, moon, and stars, mountains, rivers, and forests, and all else in creation. From this primordial creation, the goddess Nua arrived and found that the 4 pillars holding heaven and earth apart were broken. So she repaired them. Then she fashioned mankind from clay. In some cases, the stories seemed disjointed, as if combining different myths. The book of Genesis from the Torah or Old Testament is clearly a combination of a variety of oral myths. The first chapter, God creates the earth from the void in 7 days. But then in the second chapter, a heavenly garden appears out of nowhere, and God creates man in his image and creates woman from his rib. She convinces the man to eat from the tree of knowledge, and both are doomed. Linguists studying the ancient texts have noticed that different authors recorded these 2 stories because the Hebrew words they use for God changed from story to story. In the King James Version, this is represented by using the words God and Lord. And of course, the parallels to Ishtar's story are obvious. If they only had plagiarism checkers back then, those who wrote the Bible would have gotten nailed for sure. In Japan, ancient origin stories were recorded in the text called the Kojiki between 500 and 700 CE. Similar to the common rendition of Genesis, Earth is created from nothing by a few deities. The story goes, Izanami examined her body and found that one place had not grown, and told this to Izanagi, who replied that his body was well formed, but that one place had grown to excess. He proposed that he place his excess in her place that was not complete, and that in doing so, they would make new land. She greeted him by saying, "What a fine young man." They procreated and gave birth to a leech child, which they put out in a basket and let float away. Moses, anybody? They did not recognize it as one of their children. Disappointed by their failures in procreation, they consulted the deities, who explained that the cause of their difficulties was that the female had spoken first when they met to procreate. Izanagi and Izanami returned to their island and again met behind the heavenly pillar. When they met, he said, "What a fine young woman," and they mated and gave birth to 8 main islands of Japan and 6 minor islands. In summation, women shouldn't speak before men. Rude. Many Aboriginal myths attempt to explain the superiority of men and suggest that there was once a time when women dominated. In one of the Aboriginal myths, the man-eater is outwitted by the local men. It begins, in the dream time, in the land of the Murunbata people, a great river floats from the hills through a wide plain to the sea, where lived an old woman named Mutujinga, a woman of power. She could speak with the spirits because she had this power. She could do so many things which the men could not. She could send the spirits to frighten away game, to wailing people at night, or to cause a child to be born without life. The men feared the power of Mutujinga and did not consort with her. Mutujinga found no satisfaction in food, for she craved the flesh of men. Wait a minute. Whoa, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. All right, so I digress. Anyway, she creates an elaborate trap for unsuspecting men, and after one goes missing, the menfolk come to investigate. They forced her and her daughter to reveal their secrets and took control of what had been mystical. Rude. The prevalence of Venus figurines and other symbols of women across Europe convinced some, but not all scholars, the Paleolithic religious thought had strongly feminine dimensions, embodied in the great goddess and concerned with the regeneration and renewal of life. Was it possible there was a time when a goddess reigned supreme? There is some evidence that goddesses were honored above male gods. Think Ishtar. The most compelling part of this theory is our evolutionary ancestors' inability to perceive cause and effect, thereby their inability to understand birth. To them, living in this state, women were magical, capable of producing offspring out of nowhere. Every month, in sync with the moon cycle, women bled, and they didn't die. Women produced life-sustaining milk. This must have seemed wondrous, which it kind of is, of course. A similar tradition was evident when Sir Arthur Evans discovered the last Minoan civilization in the 20th century and believed the goddess figurines found represented the same Great Mother, worshipped under various names and titles. This great goddess was the creation mother and in full control of all other gods. The divine feminine is all over the early mythology stories, although she may not be all-powerful. Ishtar is considered the cosmic uterus. The Roman Mother Earth, Gaia, and the Norse Ymir emerged from the birth canal. In Egypt, the goddess Nut makes an even stronger claim for power in an engraving. "I am what is, what will be, and what has been. No man has uncovered my nakedness, and the fruit of my birthing was the sun." Many scholars take issue with the theory that these goddesses ever doubled as a great goddess. Historian Cynthia Eller explained how attractive this theory was as a woman, and yet how improbable it actually is. She dismisses the theory as wishful fantasy of a utopia that never existed. Eller adds, the myth of matriarchal prehistory is not a feminist creation, in spite of the aggressively feminist spin it has carried over the past 25 years. If the myth now functions in the feminist way, its anti-feminist past can become a merely curious historical footnote. Those Venus figurines may have just been sex objects, so we don't want to assume they were goddesses people were worshiping. It could have been really intense patriarchy in action. Whether a great goddess ever existed or not, what all these stories tell us is how in so many ways human development was similar across the globe, and that at one point, feminine attributes were considered divine before they were replaced in most parts of the world by a single male god with male prophets or messengers. It also shows how important nature, procreation, and its mystery was to early people. By the end of this era, so much remained in question. Can we know for sure if there ever was a great goddess? How reliable are oral traditions, recorded centuries or millennia after they were first told, as evidence of prehistoric culture? What would happen to women as all-male gods and prophets took over around the world? Thanks for watching. If you want to dive deeper into these questions and form your own conclusions, go to our website, remedialherstory.com, where you can find free, ready-made lesson plans, primary documents, recommended films and readings, and more.